Sitting is one of the actions that can make your severe sciatica substantially worse in a matter of moments. For some, even the prospects of sitting for something like 30 seconds can create tremendous aggravation of their sciatic symptoms. But why is this happening, and what can you do to deal with the sciatic nerve pain once and for all? If you're new here, welcome. I'm Michael Fatika, the lead osteopath and spine specialist here at Back in Shape. We help people around the UK and all over the world fix their back pain from home and get back in shape for the long term. And today we're following on from a discussion that we had with our members about how sitting makes your sciatica worse. The first thing that we need to understand is that although the sciatic nerve pain that we're experiencing is a significant problem, it is not the problem, and it is the cause that we really need to understand. Invariably, this is going to be either a bulge or a herniation to the discs in the last segments of the lumbar spine. This could be L4-5 or the very last one, the L5-S1 segment. The nerve roots, as they leave the spine at these sections, go on to form the sciatic nerve, and it is here, injuries at these segments, that either will be a disc bulge or herniation, which is directly pinning that nerve against the wall as it leaves via the exit foramina, or more commonly, there is a disc bulge there, and maybe some other tissues and ligaments are injured in that region, but it's not directly contacting the nerve, which we shot a whole video on to explain this because it's a finding that frequently leads people wondering what on earth is causing my pain. But it's a combination of the injury that is at the root cause of the disc bulge, but also the combination of inflammation building up in this confined space where the nerves leave that creates this pressure that then irritates the nerve. So whether it is simply an accumulation of inflammation around that bulging or herniated disc, or as a combination of that plus the actual direct contact onto the nerve roots that go on to form the sciatic nerve, either way, we have a fundamental issue with a load-bearing structure, the load-bearing structure of the lumbar spine. And that's something that we need to bank for later on. Most often when we've got diagnoses of herniated discs, bulging discs, sciatica, we are encouraged not to lift. And there's good reason for that. And often the thought of lifting itself really strikes fear into the heart of the person. Oh gosh, I've got to pick up that weight, or goodness me, the Amazon delivery guy has left my parcel on the floor. How am I going to get that from the front porch into the kitchen? And it's all about compressing down through those injured segments and that provoking the very injury. Why? Because we've injured those load-bearing structures. And this naturally leads people to being nervous, cautious about the prospect of adding load into their rehabilitation work, their strengthening work, the stuff that gets them better. It is, however, important to understand that these discs, no matter how badly injured and how severe your sciatica, are always load-bearing. If we take the 70-kilogram individual, we're going to be load-bearing around about maybe 40, 35 kilos worth of that body weight through those injured discs. And the question comes down to how much load can we tolerate for how long? Now, for some, it's 30 seconds of sitting. For others, 5 minutes, others a little bit longer. But it's all about the load tolerance that these discs can sustain before they start to become more strained and maybe the inflammation builds up in that area to irritate our sciatica. Often in the rehabilitation process, we're worried about lifting 5 or 10 kilos on something like a hip hinge. We're very cautious about adding that in, and perhaps rightly so. But is it any wonder then that we can't sit for durations of longer than 5 minutes or 15 minutes without getting pain? And this is where it gets really interesting. The spinal loading when you're in the seated position, particularly for those of you that are anxious about going through that recovery and strengthening process. Now, if you're in the seated position, even if you're trying as hard as you can, compared to the standing position, you're going to have anywhere from 40 to 90% extra load going through your spine. I repeat, 40 to 90% extra load going through your spine. So in this 70-kilo individual, we're talking about somewhere in the region of 16 to maybe 35, 36 kilos of extra load going through those injured discs at the root cause of the sciatica. On top of this, the load is not symmetrical, it is not square. Because we are rounding our lower back when we're sitting to a degree, in spite of our best efforts, sometimes more, sometimes less, we are going to be putting more strain on the back part of the disc, the part of the disc where we have that bulge or herniation, often going backwards to slightly to the left or slightly to the right. So the real question to ask here is, if I'm sitting down, I'm clearly unable to load more than 16, 20, 30, 35 kilos without causing my back to fail. Again, repeating the question from earlier, where am I up to in my strength rehab? And if I'm only playing around with 5 kilos or just simply using body weight at this stage, we haven't made enough progress. We're still early on. we haven't taken it far enough. The problem with rehab is we often get impatient. We've been doing the exercise, we're making some progress, but we still can't sit. And we have to understand that the sitting puts a strain on our lower back. And if we can perhaps quantify this in the way in which we have already, we can start to appreciate that that too will come. We can't currently squat with 150 kilos because we haven't got there. And so the same thing is true with other actions that exert strain onto our spine. If we're not that far in the rehab process, why are we going to be able to manage it effortlessly in the real world? Remembering that when we're in our controlled rehabilitation environment, we're in the lab. We've got all of the variables covered. We haven't got someone distracting us. We're not twisting to the side. We're executing a squat or a hip hinge with load going through our spine perpendicular to the joint. It's going straight through like so. It's not squashing down on the front like in the seated position. So it's the best environment for us to carefully expose our spine to steadily more load over the weeks, months, and years. As annoying as it can be, if you're only messing around with the 5 kilos, is it any wonder that sitting for longer than a short duration is causing you pain, is aggravating that sciatica? You're just not there yet. So do your best to stick to within the realms of what you can currently tolerate load-wise in your daily life, and focus on pushing the envelope within your rehabilitative exercises. Always looking for 2 things: aggravation-free reps and correct choreographic execution, correct technique of the movement that you're doing. At the end of the day, sciatica can be tremendously painful, and it can really limit what we can do on a daily basis. Many of us, as the British Heart Foundation covered a little while ago, we reference this research all the time, the average adult spends 9.5 hours a day sitting. And many of us are doing that every single day. Maybe it's our occupation. Maybe we're a truck driver. Maybe we're stuck at a desk. Maybe we have other things that cause us to sit, but most of us do. And if sitting is such a painful activity, it can be difficult. But no, if we had any other sort of injury, if we had a boot on our leg because we've broken the limb, or if we've had some other cast on other parts of our body, we just put up with that recovery process. And it's the same thing. It's ready when it's ready. The body will go through those natural healing processes in its own course. And the most important thing that you can do is focus on stop making the problem worse with education, with understanding, maintaining a neutral spine, all of these sorts of things we teach on the many other episodes of the podcast and to our members within the program. But then focusing on guiding that strengthening process, using exercises like we discussed in the Core 5 playlist and the Core 5 podcast episode, such as the dead bug, the hip hinge, the squat, the marching bridge, and the step up, particularly the squat and the hip hinge, as mechanisms for us to safely expose our spine to steadily more load, to help improve the competence of the musculature around our lower back, and steadily, by exposing that spine to more load, strengthen the very tissues in the lower back in an objective manner that allows us to have markers. I can now squat with 20 kilos in my hands. I can now squat with 30, 40, 50 kilos in my hands. You're not going to get there overnight. It's going to take some time. But if you carefully work on that, you will see that your progress within your rehab, and what really turns out into just workouts, your progress in those workouts will be what front runs, as in that is the main thing that you measure, that you look, that dictates the progress. It front runs the progress that you see in other areas. And then you'll suddenly start to notice, I can sit for longer without pain. And often others will notice this before you do. Say, hey, John, you're sat there, you're not getting up as much. Are you more comfortable? Ultimately, don't be fearful. Your controlled rehabilitation is the ticket to get you rid of your severe sciatica. But hopefully, by spelling out the loads that are involved in sitting, you can start to appreciate at least why you're not conditioned to do that currently for extended durations, and know that there is a pathway forwards to effectively get to be able to do these things again, whether it's sitting or others, without suffering with severe pain all of the time. Now, we made reference earlier on in this podcast to the phenomenon whereby we have a disc bulge, but it's not contacting a nerve. And this is something that really gets a lot of people, because you go to the specialist and they review your scans and they say, hey, look, John, you've got an L5S1 disc bulge, but it's not that bad and it's not pressing on the nerve. Clearly, your sciatica is not coming from here. And it really messes people up because it's not true. And secondly, it leaves you basically helpless. And we did a full deep dive podcast on this particular topic. And I think it's something very relevant to this phenomenon that we're talking about here. So definitely check that out. Link down in the description after you've watched this video. As always, if you've made it this far and found it helpful, do share it with someone else you know who's struggling with their sciatica or back pain. It will help them, I'm sure. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.